Good morning and welcome to this special CNBC Africa broadcast of the State of Railway Safety Report for the 2022 financial year. My name is Fifi Peters. Today we will be breaking down the rail report and providing an analysis of the operational occurrences as well as the security-related incidences that happened over the past year. We'll be looking at the main areas of concern to enable the regulator and operators in the industry to develop strategic interventions to improve rail safety. We look forward to your engagement. Do let us know what you think. Reach out on Twitter as well as send through questions on the platform. Without further ado, let's get the conversation going first by meeting the panelists.
Molefe Freddy Khomare, Acting Chief Operating Officer, Railway Safety Regulator. Lita Mkwabeni, General Manager, Corporate Affairs and Stakeholder Management, Transnet Freight Rail. Nelson Malefane, Acting CEO, Prasa Rail. And Tsepo Khobe, Chief Operating Officer, Gautrain Management Agency.
Gentlemen, good morning to all of you. Thanks so much for joining the broadcast. Molefe, beginning with you, just given the fact that this is a report that is published by the Rail Regulator, give us an overview of what did transpire in the year under review and what the lay of the land or the lay of the tracks in this instance is looking like.
Thank you for having us, Fifi, and a very good morning to my fellow panelists and our viewers. As already introduced, my name is Freddy Molefe Khomare, acting as the Chief Operations Officer for the Regulator. It gives me a great pleasure this morning to set the scene for this important conversation by providing some highlights from the State of Safety report for this reporting period. Now, in compliance with Section 20 of the Regulator Act, the RSR produces a report on the state of safety of the South African Railways. This report provides an analysis of operational occurrences and security-related incidents and harm to persons. Harm, we're talking about injuries and fatalities to persons. This report incorporates data from the RSR's National Information Monitoring System, the SAPS, operational occurrences and security-related incidents, and harm reports from passengers, members of the public via the RSR's contact center, as well as occurrence data received directly from railway operators. Now, we all know that over the past 18 months, nations, economies, and industries pulled together to recoup from this COVID-19 fallout. The well-being of this sector was further exacerbated by security-related incidents. Those are incidents of theft and vandalism, which had devastating consequences for the railway sector, commuters, and all our stakeholders. Now, this report highlights the reduced rail service in the current reporting period, with the combined traffic levels of Transnet, Gautrain, Prasa Rail declining by a total of 43% since 2010-11. That's quite substantial. Now, this report must then be viewed in context of these very, very low traffic volumes. And what this report tells us is that there was a 6% reduction in security-related incidents. Those are year-on-year, comparison. And this is in contrast with a 2% increase in operational occurrences when compared to the previous reporting period. In terms of injuries and fatalities, this current reporting period indicates a year-on-year fatalities, increase in the year-on-year fatalities. That's by 21% from 127 to 154 for the current reporting period. And injuries as well, we increased by 47% from 206 to 302 for the current reporting period. So we're losing quite a number of lives. And there are also injuries there. But this again must be viewed in context of the very low base from the previous reporting period. Now, there are two categories that I want to talk about. These are level crossings and people struck by trains. Because as we're seeing this, as we are reinstating services, these are the categories of occurrences and incidents that will be impacted. Now, what we're seeing from this current reporting period is that there was an 18% increase in level crossing occurrences, resulting in 10 fatalities and 54 injuries. And we're seeing again that most level crossing occurrences remain being attributable to road user behavior at these level crossings. Our road users are not obeying signage at these level crossings, and there's also an underestimation of the speed of trains. The road users are not behaving any differently from parts of the road network. When they get to the level crossings, we're seeing these levels of behaviors that are substandard that lead to these occurrences at level crossings. And unfortunately, these are high impact occurrences. We lose quite a number of lives, and there are many injuries at these level crossings. And now the next category of occurrences that is of interest is this people struck by trains. And we've seen that the number of people struck by train occurrences increased by a total of 48% between the last reporting period and this current year reporting period. Maybe I might just mention that the current year reporting period, I'm referring to the 2021-22, and the previous reporting period, I'm referring to the 2020-21, right? And these level crossing incidents or occurrences, they resulted in an increase from 70 in the previous reporting period to a total of 103. Those are the number of lives that we are losing due to level crossing occurrences. And these can be avoided. This can be avoided. I just need the panel and the viewers to take note of that. That we're losing some lives and injuring quite a number of people at this level crossing for the people struck by trains, actually. People struck by trains. And the fatalities rose from 72 to 103, and injuries from 55 to 82. Now, what are we doing as the RSR? We're seeing these numbers. We are not too happy about these numbers. If you look at security-related incidents, for example, we had a good year around 2013-14. If you look totally at the long-term trend, we're looking at a 62% increase, because it's sometimes very useful to look at these long-term trends. So we're looking at the 62% increase in the total number of security-related incidents. And most of these incidents, about 79%, we're talking to theft and vandalism of our infrastructure. That's quite worrying. So 79% of all these categories or subcategories of security-related incidents, these are mostly theft and vandalism. And like I said, since a good year that we had around 2013-14, we're seeing a 62%. The year on year, they're quite helpful, but they might not give you the full picture. So we also try to look at the full a longer trend in terms of this analysis.
All right.
Now, there are certain things that we're doing. These include interventions. These are risk-based interventions by the regulator. They include, your normal audits and inspections. These are risk-based, like I mentioned. We look at these areas that are giving us issues in terms of places, the names of operators, where should we be going, and when we get to the operator, what must be the theme of these audits and inspections. We refer to that as intervention planning. So we try to intervene at only at those high risk areas to get the most benefit of our actions. And of course, we issue these safety permits, and the issuance of these permits are based on a robust. You need to demonstrate to the regulator that you have a robust safety management system that is in place, not just on paper, but that we are implementing, that's assisting us in reaching our business objectives in a safe manner. Because I always say that, safety makes good business sense. It's no use trying to do what you want to do in terms of business, but if you're not taking care of safety, you will suffer. That's not a sustainable business.
Yeah.
And then I'm getting to the end of my speech, Madam Fifi. So we, in the end, we confirm our commitment to improve rail safety, and we'd like to implore all stakeholders, operators, and the rail community at large to do their part in keeping our railways safe. And I thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Basically, Molefe, in a nutshell, what you've told us is that rail safety actually hasn't improved. In fact, it's gotten worse. Perhaps the picture would be even more bleak if we had the number of volumes back up at normalized levels, which we don't. As you have said, that volumes have declined quite significantly since 2010. I think you cited a number of 43%. A decline in traffic volumes across all rail networks since 2010. So before we get into the impact and the effectiveness of current interventions that are underway to improve rail safety, which I would argue, based on the numbers, Molefe, that you've given us, are not really effective at this stage. I'd like to understand the volume situation, though, and what is driving volumes lower across the rail lines at this stage, and whether it has got to do with the COVID-19 pandemic, and when you, as the respective speakers...
Please, you've faded out from my side.
All right. Okay. I'll get the team, the technical team at the back to make sure that you can hear what I'm saying. But shifting on to Nelson, and I'd like a comment on volumes from you, sir, before we get into what the safety picture looks like. Can you tell us what traffic across Prus's lines has looked like in the past year, whether there has been a recovery from the disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and what the reason is if there hasn't been a recovery for the lost volumes?
Thank you. In short, I think thanks for the report that has been outlined by Freddie. And he reflected a number of issues that really affected the operators. I can also start by reflecting that we had areas of theft and vandalism that affected us negatively. That was actually attributed more by the COVID elements, where we saw quite a lot of the attack on our infrastructure. And we also experienced elements of encroachment in certain areas. But coming to the numbers has reduced drastically. And that has been caused mostly by the theft and vandalism that we have experienced in the system, especially around Gauteng, where we saw the entire network was stripped off. The stations were vandalized, all the cables were taken off. Now, in certain regions, there was an impact, but not as huge as the one that we have experienced in Gauteng. Now, if you look at the comparison of the numbers, that has really affected the services, because we have to now run what we call limited service, just to ensure that we comply with the safety measurements. You would note that if the system is fully functional, a signaling system assists us with high frequencies, then we can be able to move high numbers of people. But with an abnormal situation where you had to, manually operate these trains, you are forced to reduce the trains so that you can comply to the safety arrangements. And that this has negatively affected the number of trains that we are running, which actually add to the number of passengers that we are moving. Now, for the previous year specifically, we have moved around 66 million passengers. And then this is the drop compared to what we used to run for the previous years before we experienced all these challenges. I can also safely confirm that we are really building up the system, and we can see that numbers are growing. And you might have noticed that we have embarked on a rebuilding program, specifically within PRASA. And as we speak, there are lines that we have already opened, the lines like Mabopane, the lines like Pinasport, Soulsville. We just opened developed this week. In Western Cape, we are running the lines like the South Corridor, where you would notice that we are even running this new train. And the safety improvements are very good on those trains. They are attractive. Customers are enjoying them. The level of safety comfort is really issues that are addressing the risks that we had in the system. So I think there's quite a lot that is being done to address some of the risks that we have experienced in the system. And I think part of the safety plan or the safety report that we are talking about Our commitment behind it is the annual safety improvement plan that we normally submit to railway regulator to reflect that what are we doing, all these incidents that we experience in the system, so that they can audit, monitor them, and also determine whether we deserve the safety permit or not.
All right.
Thanks a lot, Fifi.
Thanks so much. Tepo, just give us a picture of what the Gautrain is looking like in terms of the number of passengers you have been moving over the past year. And also just to comment on what your fellow panelists have referred to, the level of vandalism, the level of theft that has impacted on their operations. Has it been as pronounced at the Gautrain also?
Thank you, Fifi, and good morning to everybody and my fellow panelists and the viewers at home. For us, the overall volume situation is now sitting at 50% of what it was pre-COVID. And what that means is that when we would have moved about 1.2 million passenger trips a month, we're now down at about 600. It is increasing steadily, but what we found is that the level of comfort of people getting back onto the train. So it's no more the same as what it used to be in the past. People think twice about being in a confined space for a very long time with other people. And as you're watching some of the numbers going up in some of the provinces on COVID, that in itself has its own impact, because what we were watching over the last 2 months is that the numbers kept climbing, and we thought it was going to cross the 60% threshold. But as soon as the COVID numbers showed up again, then it slowed down. So that has been the big challenge. We are trying by all means to be able to communicate how safe it is on the Gautrain, and making sure that we have remained with a lot of the measures that were there during COVID, like cleaning the trains at the end station and wiping them down. We have continued with some of those measures. And even though it is no more required as such by the regulations, that some of the things that we're doing, you've come to realize that the big challenge that we have is that passengers have gotten used to a certain level of comfort about the way you clean the trains, and it has been shown globally that there are certain measures that you're not going to be able to take away as an operator and as an asset owner. So some of those have remained in place, and we are communicating as much as we can to make sure that the passengers are clear that it's still safe to travel on the railway line as it is. You asked the second question about the issue of vandalism. We haven't experienced that much vandalism. I think what we did the night after, in actual evening after the president had announced the lockdown, we actually held a meeting immediately and spoke about what we're going to do in terms of security as a whole. And one of the most effective tools for security is actually running trains in the system. In as much as we didn't have passengers in that 1 month, what we did is we kept trains running along the system, just simply as a function of our security measures. And that proved to be quite a powerful statement to ensure that people are clear. Despite the fact that we have no passengers, we are still looking after the railway line. We had one incident of attempted cable theft right in the beginning. I think it was in April or so, and we found that the incident of attempted cable theft was actually an inside job, because one of the security personnel had intentionally left the place where they were posted 30 minutes before the time when they were supposed to leave. And when the whole thing was investigated, we did discover that this was actually more of an inside job than anything else. And we haven't experienced that much of a big challenge. The big challenge we are experiencing now of lately, I think when we were at the RSR conference, Freddie said something interesting. He said, some of the security incidents have reduced because probably there's nothing more to steal. But one of the things that we've always been comfortable with is that when there's nothing more to steal on the rest of the railway lines, then we are going to start experiencing attempts on our infrastructure. And the most vulnerable of our infrastructure is what we call the ancillary power part, our 11 kV that feeds signaling, that feeds the depot and places like that, that is not main part of the traction power system. And that because it's also linked to load shedding, when some at times when what do they call it, when parts of the system end up with load shedding, that's when we experience attempts on our infrastructure to try and steal cables and all of that. But what we've done is we've deployed more people in those areas that we know are vulnerable. And in actual fact, we also added more fencing in a lot of our areas to make sure that we can actually cap these areas where we have challenges with the attempts on stealing our cable. So for us, we haven't experienced that much, vandalism or at all not experience any vandalism, because we kept our security deployment, we kept our trains running, we kept the system, because we always knew a railway system is not a very easy thing to shut down, and it's also not a very easy thing to start up again. So we kept it running throughout the time when there were no trains and there were low volumes. I'll leave it there, Fifi.
What you're saying is that you've been sleeping quite peacefully at night over the past year, not worrying about security-related issues. Lita, does the same apply for you at Transnet Freight Rail? You guys, have been really busy. We've seen from the mining industry and fellow other exporters of bulk materials that it's been a good year for them. It could have possibly been better had they been able to get everything that they wanted to get out of this country out, if that capacity was available to them. But just give us a perspective of what the freight scene has been looking like in the past year in terms of security as well as volumes.
So thank you, Fifi, and the viewers. From our side, it's clear that a combination of two things have impacted on the volumes. Remember, we're targeted to do about plus minus 200 million tons in the last financial year. We ended up at 172 million tons, and that's a significant drop if you look at those numbers, from plus minus 200 million tons to 172 million tons. The critical factor was the COVID period, because obviously as Transnet Freight Rail, we depend on moving goods to the ports, to key trading markets in the world. And if those markets are closed, China, North America and Europe, when they are closed, it means we cannot be able to move. The system gets clogged to a large extent. But we think that in general, the biggest contributor to a reduction in volumes was the security incidents. We have seen a major spike in the incidents of theft of overhead cables, rails in some instances. But because we think that safety is important for employees, train drivers and so on, when such incidents happen, we put contingency measures so that we protect the drivers and the crew, so that they're not exposed to a very dangerous environment. And then we fix the line, particularly replace the overhead cables, so that the drivers are not exposed to dangerous situations. It has resulted in a significant number of reduction in slots that we have, first and foremost, but also capacity. The third component that would have contributed to the reduction of our volumes is the availability of locomotives, and that's less the focus of the topic today. But I agree with the RSR. We've experienced a major spike in these incidents. In just one corridor, the coal line, just the coal line alone last year, we lost a revenue of about 1 billion rands, through these incidents, and therefore reflects in the number of volumes. It also shows up in the revenue that we made. We didn't achieve the target that we were hoping to achieve in terms of revenue. And our revenue basically reduced to about 37 billion in the last financial year, compared to the target that we're looking at of about 40 billion rands annually. So we are taking measures, first and foremost, to deal with some of these incidents based on the report that the RSR issues. We've identified safety as a key strategic priority in our agenda. to turn around, the Transnet freight rail. We also submit the improvement plan to the RSR, basically targeting the areas that the RSR would have identified. We close those issues through the safety improvement plan. So those are the actions we're taking at this point, Fifi, basically to train our employees to be more conscious around safety, but also to ensure that we work with communities, because some of the people who vandalize, our track and the overhead cables reside in communities. So our emphasis has been to campaign in the communities, to educate the communities about the importance of safety, and because sometimes if a train, derails because, a cable has been removed, it may affect some of the nearby communities. It may expose them to danger. So those are some of the key strategic actions that we're taking to turn around the safety situation. Thank you, Fifi.
All right, Lita, coming back to you, do you think it will be enough? The interventions that you're currently doing right now, do you think they'll be impactful? And if not, do you think you need help, and from who?
No, that won't be enough. I mean, we've started to do a lot of work with the police, and security companies, to ensure that we enlist, the capacity that exists within the police. Obviously, the police has the intelligence capacity. We don't play in this intelligence space. So in instances where we identify syndicates, that are vandalizing our infrastructure, we elicit, the capacity that is within the police, and the criminal justice system, so that the people who are caught up vandalizing our infrastructure can be sent to jail for a longer period. And the law is assisting in this instance. Because some of the people who've caught, they've been sent to jail for 15 years, which was not done in the past. It was just treated as, smaller crimes and so on. But the criminal justice system now is moving, is investing a lot of resources to deal with this, because this infrastructure is strategic for the development of the country. It is strategic for the economy. But over and above that, we've identified the need to focus on investment in technology, because if we're going to rely on human beings, they can't guard the whole 22,000 kilometers of rail that we have. So we cannot rely on putting every individual next to every railway line. We have to use technology such as drones and other new technology to be able to reduce significantly, the incidents. That's the only time when we'll make a dent, when we have greater collaboration with the police and other law enforcement agencies and the use of technology, to deal with these issues.
Tsepo, how's about you? I mean, you made a reference to say that a recent conference that you were at with Molefe or Freddie, where he said that, everything that had to be stolen had already been stolen right now, and that he was expecting some a reduction in theft and vandalism over in his place. But you just said that made the Gautrain a little bit more vulnerable. So you said that you have deployed a whole lot of people. I imagine you meaning security, and that you've increased the level of fencing around vulnerable areas. Do you think that will be enough, or is there anything else that the Gautrain is planning to do to mitigate itself from being the next target?
Look, Vivi, I think we need to discuss this thing clearly in its context, in the sense that with the economy that is struggling as it is right now, some of these crimes are a function of people being, desperate. Some of them are syndicates. I mean, what we have actually been for years been doing is we've collaborated quite highly with private security intelligence companies, and they had given us dates and times when people were targeting some of our infrastructure, and we were there to actually make sure that we foil some of these plans. We used to have a big challenge with, what do they call it, with the airport line, where syndicates would just target that line because it just sits in the middle of an area that is undeveloped, and factories and which are shut during the evening. And a couple of times we had been on the right spot. When we got there, there were already people starting to deploy. But one of the functional challenges that you have is that some of the knowledge that these people had, or the intelligence teams that we found, was that it was related to certain shutdowns on the system. And those shutdowns meant that somebody somewhere internally was leaking information when power was going to be switched off. And that are some of the areas that you have to plug. Because if you don't plug those areas where the internal information gets leaked to what they call it, to the public and to all these syndicates, then you're going to have a problem. There is no technology that will save you. I mean, our entire network is covered up with flare, what do they call it, infrared cameras that can sense and detect motion. And actually, you can set up zones on them to be able to see people that are walking closer and closer to the track, or that are persistently walking very close to the track. But the second context that we also have to manage that goes beyond the issue of the economy. I think we have over the years allowed settlements to creep closer and closer to what they call it, to railway lines. And they're doing so unabated. And one of the biggest challenges that both PRASA and what they call it and Transnet has, it's all these settlements that have been allowed to come closer and closer to the line. In certain cases, there was an incident that I was told in what they call it in the Northwest, where a settlement appeared on the left-hand side of the railway line. And what do they call it? The municipality built a school across the railway line. And these are some of the challenges that we have to be able to discuss, because there isn't that much we collectively can do as what do they call it, as executives in these railway companies, if the context within which we function actually leads us to be able to struggle more and more. And I think Transnet will tell you the same thing, PRASA will tell you the same thing. And we've seen it here where we've had incidences where houses that were being built closer to the line, the roofs were blown off and we ended up on the railway line and damaged some of our trains and some of our infrastructure. We have to manage this thing. And it's an external force that actually does not sit in our power. And even what they call it, the RSR regulations do not cover the issue of how do we manage the encroachments that are happening in and around the railway line and the development of settlements around railway line. And I think we need to discuss this thing in its context rather than just being, simple about the issue.
Then, Nelson, are you going to tell me the same thing as Tsepo alluded, that settlements and these houses that are popping up just around the railways are also impacting the infrastructure around your trains there at PRASA, but also impacting the level of security and vandalism? And if so, what have you done about it? Has there been conversations perhaps with the Department of Human Settlements about the fact that this is an issue? And if so, what have they said?
Once again, look, I think without really taking much on what the colleagues have reflected, it is true, and I've indicated that one of the risks that we are dealing with is this encroachment that we have experienced. Now, one of the good examples from PRASA side, it's in Western Cape, the Central Line. Now, that is one of the key lines, if you'd recall, that were announced by the President to be recovered. I can tell you that 60% of the movements in Western Cape are coming from that particular line. So we have been engaged with the stakeholders that are relevant. The HTA is one of them, the city of Cape Town, as well as the communities, together with the security companies that are assisting us, or law enforcement. So it has really been a tricky issue. As we speak now, the contractors are really on site to take work so that they can be able to rehabilitate that line. But I think we need to go through that hurdle of following the right processes of ensuring that we remove those people and place them where they're supposed to. But I can tell you that it takes time and it really frustrates the customers out there. But I think there's quite a lot of work that is being done by PRASA to make sure that we remove those people. In other areas where we experience that, Fifi, we've managed to actually remove the people as quick as we can so that we can be able to run the trains. So Tsepo was right that the socioeconomic factors, they really contribute to the situation, that we are working with government, jointly with other stakeholders to make sure that we mitigate that. Thanks a lot.
And by the way, thanks so much for the questions that have come through so far. In fact, let's start to taking them right now. And Lita, I think there's a question that is directed to you because it is talking about the line from Gauteng to Durban. The question goes, Lita, that the line from Gauteng to Durban is still down. Is it? is the line from Gauteng to Durban still down? Because this is adding a huge risk to the N3. Can you comment on that?
No, I mean, some parts of the line have been opened. Remember, the reason why the line was closed is because of the floods. And if you go back to the previous discussion, that the panelists have raised, we've seen a lot of encroachment on the line between Gauteng to Durban. A number of informal settlements. And on our part as Transnet, we've engaged the municipality, around, the extent to which we can remove the people from encroaching onto our servitude and the rail reserves. So one of the experiences we saw during the floods was that some of the homes that were very close to our line were swept away. And I think we lost about two lives, and therefore we're engaging with Salga and COGTA as a department to basically say, we need a mechanism, because the law is a bit complex when it comes to this. If people have settled in next to your servitude, over 3 days, you have to go to court, get an order from the court to remove the people, and there are some protections because when you remove them, you have to find an alternative piece of land where you can locate them, and sometimes that land does not exist. So specifically to respond to the question, we've had to do a major rehabilitation of the line between Johannesburg to Durban because the floods had impacted us heavily on that line. Most of the work is near completion at this point. Some of the parts of the line have been reopened.
Can you give us a timeline on when you expect that work to be completed?
We expect that the whole line, which is we call it within ourselves the container corridor, we move a lot of containers up to the port. We hope that by the end of November, the full line will be open by that time. But the significant parts of the line are open.
Okay.
I mean, you've got branch lines that are linking into that, which are not significant. They're not part of the main line. But significant parts of the main line have been opened. We've had to do a lot of work. We've spent about 3 billion rands rehabilitating that line.
Let's take another question coming from Rafik Mbutuka. And it is a question about plans in terms of achieving the integration with other railway corridors in the SADC region, as is stipulated by SARA in the long term. So that's the Southern African Railway Association, the plans for integration. Nelson, is PRASA at the table in terms of conversations around integrating railways with other railways on the continent? What can you tell us there?
Yes, PRASA is part of the team with Sarah. And personally, I'm also the chairperson of the passenger services task team that is actually looking at all the interventions that needs to be in place to access the SADC countries. And I know that part of our last resolution that we had last month, it was to prioritize this land specifically. And we prioritized Johannesburg to Zimbabwe, to Zimbabwe, specifically Harare, as our priority line. And that's where our focus will be, just to make sure that we open up the markets to those particular countries. And from there, we'll be rolling them out. And our next line was the line to Maputo, and then looking at all other lines to connect the SADC countries. So we are part of the discussions that are going to take place in SARA for this coming conference that is taking place this week. Thanks.
Yeah, and just as part of that integration, what is the discussion around improving safety? Because I imagine that some of the challenges being faced by rail operators within their respective countries could possibly be amplified with a level of integration. Just invites us into your confidence about the strategy and the thinking of improving safety as you integrate.
The positive part is that railway safety regulator is part of that particular intervention. That goes with other entities in those particular countries, because our approach has been, we need to take the risk approach strategy. What does that mean is that before we can even start thinking about investment, we need to assess the particular corridor, level of investment that needs to go into it, so that we can ensure that the network itself Is it in the right standard to ensure that we provide services safely from point A to point B? So that is part of the strategy to make sure that the conditions of the lines are not different from where we start and end the services.
So Lita, you were talking about what Transnet is doing right now with Mozambique?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we are not just integrating with the railway operators in the region for the sake of it. There are key operational issues relevant to that. For example, in Mozambique, part of dealing with the congestion on the Durban port, we've seen the Mozambican port as an alternative of moving goods. So we've signed an agreement with CFM, which is a railway operator of Mozambique, wherein our trains, and also trains of CFM can pass through seamlessly into the country without what we used to have in the past, where there were a lot of stoppages on the line. Secondly, we've been working with Trans-Namibia, around how we can, synergize our activities with them to move goods to Namibia. If you take Botswana, for example, Botswana is a landlocked country, and therefore they depend on our ports in Durban and Richards Bay to move things like fuel and so on, jet fuel also. So we've had to work with the railway operator of Botswana in order to allow our trains to move jet fuel from South Africa into Botswana and other commodities for that matter. I mean, we're also part of SARA, and through that association, we're able to align, There are safety challenges. I mean, the chrome that we moved to Mozambique, we've discovered in the last month that there was a syndicate that was working in the Northeast Corridor. And what they were doing, they were not vandalizing the train, but they were stealing the actual chrome of the customers themselves. So we're a joint operation with the police, wherein we were able to identify that a syndicate in one of the informal settlements in Mpumalanga, and those people have been arrested. That happened last month. Because when the customer goods are stolen on the train, it has serious implications for us from a revenue point of view, but also from the confidence of the customer. But it also impacts on the broader agenda of moving cargo from road to rail. So we have to give our customers confidence that when they move their own cargo through the rail, there are no risks such as what had happened to the chrome customers whose chrome was stolen on the rail. So in some of the informal settlements, people will get onto the train, and as the train is moving, then they steal the chrome. So we realize that it's not only smaller people or smaller criminals who are doing that. The ones who are practically doing it are doing it on behalf of people who want to sell chrome elsewhere.
Sure.
So that's how we've been dealing with the issue.
Sure. And I suppose the fact that, you have a really lucrative commodity price environment right now that is making such a behavior a lot more enticing, doesn't make matters easy for you. But Lita, I'm glad that you mentioned the issue of risk management because the arrests, very welcomed, probably sending a really strong signal out there to people to say that you're not planning to sleep on this, so you will go for the perpetrators. But that's after the fact. So now if I or any of your customers are wanting an assurance around what your risk management strategy is to protect their cargo and ensure that their cargo is safe, what's Transnet's plan there?
What we've discovered is that, as you are pointing out, when you deal with these things after the fact, it doesn't give confidence on the one hand. But what we've seen is that if you close, particular syndicates in a corridor, they tend to move to another corridor. So the risk-based approach simply also anticipate what the next move of some of the syndicates are going to be. On the manganese side, we have seen, we move manganese through the Cape Corridor up through the PE port. What we've seen is that even in smaller towns, which have a very small population in the Eastern Cape, an area called Peterson, that we've never seen any level of vandalism and crime. That in those areas, we're starting to see that crime. When we dug deep into what was the cause, it was not people from Peterson. It was a syndicate that had moved from Northwest, realized that we've closed in Northwest, and then started to move to areas that would be relatively seen to be quiet. And therefore, our strategy is to work with the Police Crime Intelligence Division to be able to identify ahead of time the possible movements of some of the syndicates when we close them in some areas. We've also benefited from the lessons that our customers in the coal mining industry and etc. They have massive experience of some of the criminal syndicates that have tried to take their commodities at the mines. So we've benefited from a collaboration with our customers because they have massive experiences around how to deal with crime. So we've joined projects with them. For instance, on the chrome side, security companies who work at the mines are jointly working with our own security and the police, to share experiences and information, because information is critical if you want to close down the syndicates.
Response. Freddie, coming back to you, and I'm really hoping we get to you this time around, because it's that question again on what can be done to improve human behavior regarding train safety, just given the fact that fatalities and people who are actually getting injured from crossing the tracks when they shouldn't be and driving past the tracks when they shouldn't be are on the rise. And it's actually a comment that's also come from one of the speakers to say what is being done about this. I mean, from their view, there are people and children who play on the rail track, and it leads to these incidences. And you've actually got a lot of drivers who suffer from depression as a result after having hit these people down. So what is the regulator doing to try and increase the awareness regarding safety from a human behavior?
Yeah, thank you, Fifi, and apologies for the beliefs that I'm experiencing. Firstly, I want to get back to the regulatory framework. Something that's very recent is what we refer to in terms of regulations, is what we refer to as fancy regulations that sort of requires or directors, operators to look at their corridors, to look at where the risks are, and then submit to the regulator in terms of what they are going to do in terms of those risk of encroachment, people moving on to the rail reserve, building in the rail reserves, and needing to cross over to amenities on the other side of the rail tracks, so on and so on. And what the regulation says is that give us, the regulator, that risk-based plan that tells us that so we're not looking for China walls, if I may use that term, everywhere, but we're looking at a way of protecting our rail reserve, which could include issues that were referred to by the panelists. We need to look at employing technologies involving the communities around these rail reserves, because they need to understand, besides the risks that these assets pose to them, they need to understand mostly that these assets belong to them. They need to be looking after these assets. We have criminals that are living within our communities, syndicates as well. We need to have them exposed, because in the end is the larger community that will suffer. The involvement of the SAPS and then the law as well. We welcome the developments, the recent developments, and the developments around the harsher sentences for these criminals. The 15-year sentence that was meted out to these criminals that had entered the Transnet, reserves to do what they do. Now, in terms of that's that. In terms of the regulatory framework is quite robust. It might be new, not everyone knows about it, but we'll continue communicating that. But quickly coming to now the awareness, awareness around these, because communities live alongside these corridors. They need to be aware of the dangers. Now, there's a whole lot of work that we are doing with regards to that. We need to make everyone aware. If we talk about, we have, for example, we're looking at, those high risk level crossings. We're going out to those level crossing. We, teaching the communities about the dangers of, not behaving correctly around level crossings. People strike by trains, we do that as well. They need to know the dangers. I mean, we have kids, unfortunately, children that are involved, but it's purely due to lack of awareness. And we're using technologies as well. The beautiful things that my colleagues from communications are doing in terms of using these social platforms, your Twitters and so on. There are beautiful things that they are doing, reaching out to affected communities, making sure that they are aware of the risk that they're being exposed to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks so much. And I'd just add to that, perhaps also looking at investing in some support for drivers, train drivers who are on the other side of the wheel, as it were, in knocking down some of these people of the tracks. It seems that there is a need to help them through that traumatic experience, I can only imagine. But one more question that we can take just in the interest of time that has come from the audience. Lita, you've spoken a bit about this in terms of what Transnet is doing to try and go for these criminal syndicates, as it were. You are investing in security. You are learning from the mining sector, using some of the playbook that they use to try and protect their cargo. Perhaps, Nelson, you can just give us PRASA's take. What is PRASA doing? Or what more can you do at this stage to combat some of those crime syndicates that are stealing copper specifically and going after scrap dealers who trade in stolen copper?
Once again, I think that has been a very tough lesson that we have picked up out of this copper material. And part of the intervention in putting the new network, it was to ensure that we minimize this copper as much as possible. And I can confirm that with our security interventions, we really had no incidents where we have currently rebuilt or rehabilitated the lines. Yes, part of our security team, they are really doing work in terms of going through these scrapyards to really get those that are really stealing the copper. And you'll note that it is basically all the entities that get affected, the ESCOM, Telcom, and all other entities. But I think even from the shareholder point of view, ministry level, there are discussions that are in advanced stage to make sure that those scrapyards get closed. And not everyone must be allowed to do that, because really, if it is open to everyone, this is where the government is experiencing serious problems. So it is a really joint effort and interventions to make sure that we mitigate this risk of theft within the rail infrastructure equipment.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you. Tshepo, I'm going to give you the last word as we wrap up this discussion. I mean, a lot has been said. We've discussed that the pictures is pretty bleak. It could be worse if we were looking at similar kinds of volumes. We've discussed the fact that there's a number of interventions underway. You even made a point that, I mean, investing in technology, wonderful, but there's only so much that technology can do, particularly when you're working with criminal syndicate groups. But as we wrap up this discussion, what can be done differently, in your view, to ensure that when we meet again this time next year, we're looking at a slightly improved picture when it does come to rail safety? Just any quick wins in your view.
Thank you, Phoebe. And I think that's what they call it. That's a good question. I think we need to go back to basics, Phoebe. You know, when you talk about safety and things like level crossing, you talk about the 3 E's of what do they call it, of safeties in the railways. And when you talk about the 3 E's, you talk about education, enforcement, and engineering or eliminate. When you look at it, so when you look, we've done a lot of engineering and eliminating. Molefe spoke about a lot of education that is being done. The biggest challenge we're sitting with now is enforcement. And once with the win that Transnet has had, where somebody has been sent to jail for 15 years, then that is starting to bring on that enforcement. And we just need to loop the entire system so that the enforcement part, and that's what has been lacking so far. So we were very good at educating our commuters and communities around our systems. We're very good at engineering things out and trying to sort them out from an engineering perspective or eliminating them. But enforcement has been lacking. So we're looking forward to the laws being enforced and us taking it forward from then. But one of the key things, lastly from me, Vivi, that we need to do is we need to get the communities to own the property and the assets of the railway lines. We have not covered ourselves in glory in terms of making sure that we have shared value. And as we continue with the one part of educating, we also need to be able to build the railway line into the communities that it operates in. And that is an area which is an indictment on us as what they call it as railway executives, that we have always kept it away from what they call it from the community. It is clear now that shared value is the only way in which we're going to protect these assets, because only the community can protect them, and we can only do so much, and budgets can only run so far. But shared value is the way forward. Thank you, Fifi.
Thanks, Tepa. I agree with you on those critical points regarding enforcement as well as shared value. I think that there has been a greater attention that has been placed towards enforcement, just investing in that area and capacitating it a little bit more. It remains to be seen whether it will be impactful going ahead, but definitely shared value. A win-win kind of a situation whereby you want to protect what you also own and have a piece of pie in. And I'll just add to say that, I mean, I do look forward to the situation around rail being improved, just given the fact that rail is has such a critical role to play in the development of the continent, particularly as we move towards a greener and a more just way of doing things. We know it can move a whole lot more people and a whole lot more volumes at lower emissions, and therefore it is critical that rail is put on track in terms of security and safety. But with that said, that wraps up our special broadcast for today on the State of Railway Safety Report for the 2021-2022 financial year. Thanks so much for listening and engaging with us as audience members, and thank you to all the panelists who also afforded us their time this morning. That wraps it from us until we do it again. Goodbye.